Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 237 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to expand our sodium hydroxide production to give us the resources we need for the tier 3 ore mixtures. Enjoy. That's stage 2, and some of this output will be sent to the side as a bypass, just like some of this output will be sent to the side, but also the rest of it will go forward to the final tier of preparations. And there is an extra step in here we need to consider. We have to process the sulfuric wastewater. But another thing we want to consider is, what do we do with sodium hydroxide? Because 2 of these setups is going to require 15 sodium hydroxide a second, which is, if it's a yellow belt, I mean, if you have enough resources that it's essentially a belt, it's probably too much for drones, because otherwise you'll just have a drone every other second running, basically, and it just fills up fast. So we might as well use part of this setup here to generate the sodium hydroxide. We do store it here, and we do have a depot to send it places if necessary. But I think we're sending it to places like the science bus. Yeah, there it is. It's just not needed in very large quantities, so it's acceptable to send it there. But when it's needed in larger quantities, like for aluminum, you see, it goes straight in there on a belt. And that's because we need 25 per second of it. So, do we want to send this belt down here? And in fact, we couldn't really send it down there because we would need a second belt, because most of this is needed for aluminum. That is a long way to go. And this factory, although it has trains now, it's not really big enough to be making train requests for every random thing, because otherwise there would be no space, because there would be train stations everywhere. So having a train station for every random item is an expansion thing. Like, it works up here, because up here we had tons of space, and we built these setups around the idea that a train could be sent for every single random item that you need. But it needs a lot of space to do that, and even LTN compacts it this much, and it still requires a ton of space. So, with our old setup, I'm thinking logistically, the best idea is to just electrolyze it here. And luckily, we already have some little squares here, although we'll probably want to update them with better modules or other things. Or we could be lazy and just copy them. I guess we'll have to see how many of these we might need. But we already have a setup, and the 2 byproducts of this are chlorine and hydrogen. It's not something you necessarily want to send across the factory, but depending on the numbers, it might not be that bad. So let's see what it would look like. So we would be electrolyzing saline water, and it would require 1500 per second, which I see why we did this. It's because it was too much for the factory. We do probably have the saline water nearby, and it does look like it. I haven't double checked that all these pipes are connected, but I guess they are, because they're not maxed out. Guess we can check over here at the very end. Yeah, and they seem normal, but our factory does have some saline water byproducts, so we could potentially pull it off of here to an extent. And yeah, we have a dump right here as well. So we have access to some of it, but we don't want to rely on that, and that's too much for one pipe anyway, and our factory only has 1 pipe. So we'll probably still need the salination plants nearby. But we can throw in our better modules and see what happens. Well, it makes it a clean 5. And then the fast way to make the water is just with the salination plants. So we grab those, and we need, unfortunately, a ton of them. So even with the module, we're still going to need quite a few. And lots of water, so... Well, how much does this setup even make in total if it was going at full blast? Just the 30, so that makes sense that it was sized for what it was actually needed for. So, if we would need about 9 machines, well, we have about 9, so we could just put a 10th one in there. And we have about 5 electrolyzers on the side. So this setup would work pretty well. We would probably want to hook up the hydrogen to the base at large here. And it is hooked up. And then we can use a heat source to get rid of it. We do have the higher tiers of heat sources now. And heat exchangers, I believe. So now that we're here and we actually have a use for them, it's probably worth making them. So we'll grab it. That requires the heat pipe 2s. I'm pretty sure we can already make those. We're just not making them. And we want the burner heat source as well. So grab that. And I don't know if the steam engines can be upgraded. We have the blues here. And it looks like the next tier is steam turbine, but that's cobalt. Otherwise, for the purples, we would need titanium. So, can't quite do that, but we do have those better heat sources, so we'll do that and let it pretty much instantly build here. Okay, we have a supporting component that we need to get in here. And hopefully we can reuse much of this. It's got logic attached to it, it's got the pipes. So for now, I guess just plop it right here and see what it looks like. It's nice having robots to help. Okay, and this is actually going to be nearby water, so it's not going to need the pump jacks. And we have a lot of plastic pipes in there. And it looks like we've already got our upgrade planner set up for this, so let's just get rid of the blue. Okay, we got another one of these, which we can put there. More pipes. One thing to be worried about here is the flow rate is so high that we essentially need about 4 pipes of input, and there's only the 1 pipe here. So I think with Speed Module 5s, this setup really isn't going to work, and honestly, even the existing one was probably fairly borderline. Because how much did this need? Yeah, it was pretty close. It was pretty close to borderline. I think like 1200 is about the maximum a pipe would get, but 1000 is a pretty safe number. So unfortunately, this is going to have to be redone because of throughput. And one thing I kind of see here is we kind of have a 2-to-1 ratio of 2 plants going into 1 electrolyzer. And that has the advantage of kind of splitting up the pipes in a healthy way as well. So hopefully the personal robots grab some of these so we have stuff to build with. And the base bots help for the rest. Alright, we'll come over here, I guess. So this is going to be bigger, but great thing about having space is having space. So this will come from somewhere. The water's probably going to be on the right, so we'll set it up that way, and looks like all our research is done. And then it has an output going into 1 electrolyzer. And actually, if we kind of put it right here, we can probably avoid using the underground. Actually, before we take this too far, let's make sure there's no better ways of sodium hydroxide rather than kind of brute forcing it this way. Well, there's only 5 recipes in total. One of them is the electrolysis here. 2 of them are a result of high tier gold and silver processing, so then we're left with these other 2. One is just adding purified water to sodium. And sodium isn't something you create quickly. We can electrolyze salt, but we're already doing that on the other setup, and salt is a very limited resource, so that will only work so well. And our base is already doing it as fast as we can, so I know there isn't going to be extras. And if we already had sodium hydroxide, we can electrolyze it, so that's not a choice. Then the other one is sodium sulfate. That one is basically its own byproduct, where you can make it from sodium hydroxide as a byproduct from brown liquor, byproduct from hydrochloric acid, and chromate. So not really easy ways of getting that either. So I don't think processing sodium is a good idea. But there is the method of sodium hydroxide, which I don't think is going to be a good idea, because isn't that just sodium hydroxide added to water? So that's probably not going to be great, but... So let's see what creates sodium hydroxide solution here. Well, we could make it from sodium hydroxide, which is what we're already trying to do. And the other one is sodium carbonate. So let's follow that down. Well, here we go. It's made from brown algae and purified water. That's something we could potentially do. That might require a bunch of algae farms, but I kind of might prefer that over just having a bunch of salination plants and just a bunch of pipes, because whenever you have a logistics issue, you always kind of have to wonder, is there a better, more efficient way of doing this? One way is from sodium, so that's not a choice. Byproduct from paper, a byproduct from coke purification, which we haven't really been doing it that way. We could, to get some of this back. So if we set this up to make sodium carbonate, we probably would want to update the coke purification. Better tier of alumina, better tier of chrome. So it looks like brown algae. And then that brown algae comes from saline water. So the question is, are the numbers better or worse to make this from brown algae? So we want sodium hydroxide from solution. We want 15 of them. The solution comes from carbonate. And the carbonate comes from the brown algae. And the brown algae comes from saline water. And I guess we could do the tier 4 farm now if we needed to. We haven't researched it yet, but we could make it, so we might as well. So we'll just set that to number 4 to give us an idea. And, well, big numbers, but speed modules are a thing. So that drops it to 37, but it has a much lower requirement for saline water. Instead of like 4 different pipes of saline water, just the factory saline water could potentially power this. So I'm kind of liking this. Even though it's going to end up being a bigger setup. We'll have to see here. Well, only one electrolyzer for all of this. Okay, well, everything said and done, we're looking at an input of some purified water, which would actually take away from the saline water requirement, so we might as well hit that one as well. Throw the speeds in there. So we'll just hit that to 0 for now to get it to link up properly. So that's about 1 pipe of water, and then 600 saline water. It would require some electrodes, but we would just wash those and would create some carbon dioxide, which our factory does need, and give us sodium hydroxide. So at least going by all of the numbers, this is really materially efficient. The only problem is space, because that would require 38 algae farms. And we don't have too many big setups, but we do have this, and that has 20. So it would be about twice as big as this. And, I mean, it would fit here. It would just be off to the side even further. So we have that option of spending 19 megajoules doing that. Or spending 7 megajoules to do it the brute force way. The brute force way will give us chlorine and hydrogen. Whereas with algae, we would get carbon dioxide and some other stuff. Well, one other potential limitation is just the amount of brown algae we would need here. So we would need 10 red belts of algae. So it would basically be like 1 belt of algae going into every liquefier. So the scale of this is fairly high. I don't know. It's hard to turn down such a smaller setup like this of just having 15 machines compared to 52. Because it does worry me that we would need 10 red belts of brown algae to make this work, which is much worse than 4 pipes of water. Plus, this does produce some hydrogen gas, and we would need the chlorine for random stuff. But the thing about hydrogen is, if we switch over the factory from, instead of electrolyzing water to make oxygen, if we switched to using these air filters instead, then we would be at a huge lack of hydrogen for things. So we probably want to have methods of making hydrogen elsewhere. Plus, hey, look at that, it's actually running right now. And it seems like it's keeping up with chlorine just fine. And chlorine isn't the best thing to vent, but whatever. I feel like the best thing to do is something that is small and modest when it comes to the numbers, as opposed to something that is giant. I don't know, it seems better that way. That whenever you have complicated logistics, maybe pick the way that isn't complicated. So we have 2 pipes going in here. It's not quite centered, I guess, but it can't be. But close enough. And it looks like the chlorine and hydrogen numbers are small enough to where they can be on a single combined pipe. So we can do something like this. And then it's just a question of getting these 15 sodium hydroxides out of here, and how would that work? I don't know if I want to trust Hellmod for this. Where the red one is 5.29. So that seems about right if we had 5 of these. Because I don't know if the yellow would be fast enough. Well, it technically would, but just barely. So I'm thinking, let's go with red. So, it would be something like this. But kind of a long and narrow setup. It is what it is, but it can just go along the edge. And for now, I guess we'll just assume that the belt goes down. Although on this last one, because we want to alternate near and far on all of these to fill up the belt, number 5 here should probably have 2 inserters. Going on to each side. Uh-oh, out of power. Well, one thing we need to calculate here is the consumption of all of this hydrogen. Well, we would get that heat from a fluid burning heat source. So that heat would go into a boiler, but I am not seeing it anywhere. Unless it is elsewhere. We have our steam. Not sure what temperature that stuff runs at. Probably not that one, because it didn't select properly. Well, it's 465. So we'll try to add that in here. 465 degree steam. Except it's in a heat exchanger. There we go. I think it's starting to work here. And then that steam, well, it doesn't have it selected here. I think we have to add it manually. Goes into a steam engine to make electricity. There we go. Took a little bit of work to get that lined up, but we finally have it. And I think I calculated the neighbor bonus of these reactors wrong, because when I saw 2 nuclear reactors, I thought that was like 2 on each side, so in other words, a total of 4 reactors. Like I was thinking this as the neighbor bonus, so a neighbor bonus of 2 because you have 2 reactors next to you. But I think what this actually means is the size of the square. So if you just had 2 reactors, it says it's plus 100. And you see the neighbor bonus, and that's actually an interesting thing, of the burner heat source 2. The neighbor bonus is twice as big, so those are actually really good. We might have to upgrade our factory with these at some point. But the neighbor bonus is 100%. So, if we just had 2 of them sitting next to each other, not in a square, but just 2 of them, the bonus would be 100%. So if we had a group of 4 of them sitting next to each other, they would each be touching 2 reactors, which would give a bonus of 200%. So I think that's kind of how I calculated that wrong before. So now that that is there, that gets that taken care of, because we're going to have 3.5 of them. And then the heat exchangers don't matter, we just have 9 of them, and then they all go into their 35 steam engines. So now we have our power setup ready, so we can take care of these pipes. And since this thing is so long, might as well just kind of put these over here somewhere. We'll see how big it ends up being, whether we want it to go down or to the side. But we also want to make sure we have all of these things on the bus. I'm thinking these particular items were actually being made bus style with belts here instead of with bots going everywhere. So I don't know which way is superior. I mean, certainly the bots are more convenient, but it all depends on what goes into everything. To make the heat exchanger 2 comes from a heat exchanger 1, which would be at the very top of this. And it looks like we already were using bots to some extent right here, so if that's the case, we probably should continue to do it that way. So it goes from stone furnace to boiler, boiler 2, boiler 3, heat source boiler 1, and then heat source boiler 2. So let's move this in a slightly more convenient location, just like right here. And we might as well upgrade these with the module inserter. Looks like they were already set. So we can just go across all of these and update the modules. But those are our heat exchangers. So to do this, we would want one more. Let's put the requester chest down. Copy one over. Get rid of that. And copy it over. And pick that one up. Drop it back. And there we go. No crazy requests. But this does require the invar, so do we have invar nearby? We do. So we want to make sure we're good there. And brass pipes. Looks like, yeah, we do have them over here. So they're already delivering them. That's a lot of robots. The main thing we need is the heat pipe 2, which have a higher maximum temperature. So we already have a setup making the heat pipe 1s here. I guess I used all of these machines just for the productivity modules. So I guess we'll do the same thing here. Let's calculate a heat pipe 2. And it looks like that recipe changed because I think it used to require silver. And now it's just aluminum and invar. So that's pretty good. So what did this other one build them at? A rate of 2. So is that still going to be the same? Yep, just one machine. There's no reason for speed modules, so I guess efficiency, and pollution, and then I guess another one. So that would make it negative 80 and negative 80%. Then we have some big input numbers. The plate would come from choppers, but it may only require 1.25 machines, but then when you start adding in a bunch of productivity modules, you need many more. So let's see what happens to it. Luckily, the productivity 5s are actually pretty fast. So that cuts that down, so it's not nearly as crazy as it was on that other setup. Seems good, and also the pipes do not feed into each other. So that's not something we need to worry about. We have invar nearby, and aluminum does not appear to be nearby. It kind of goes down here. But we do have an interesting little space right here. So I think we could use it. for this build. So aluminum choppers, we need 4 of them. We need to be careful we can't put an inserter right in the middle here. So we'll do like an input there, and it's interesting how to get 20 plates out, we only need to put 2.5 coils in. So that is the power of coils plus efficiency modules. And then the output is 20, and I never really trust Hellmod much anymore with this, that my faith has been broken with its slightly inaccurate inserter recommendations, but I think that's fine. Then it comes up here, and this is what makes our heat pipe 2, which looks like heat pipe 1 is 750 and number 2 is 1000. So productivities, and then efficiency and pollution. So that gives us that, and then we have 20 per second of input. And what does that look like? Basically 3 of these. Alright. And then we would need some of this Invar. I'm not sure why it's a red belt there. It doesn't really need to be. Unless this needs that much, but doesn't look like it. But if they were both running at the same time, they would. So I'll just leave it as red. And 10 per second would be 2 stack inserters. So let's make this point downwards there so we can put these belts in here. So we're not picking up on a corner. And then we would be making our 2 per second. And how many pipes are we holding on to? Seems like not very many. 50? Seems like we might need a lot more than that with various builds. Kind of want to set it to like 200. And set this to heat pipe 2. And now I think we just need to get aluminum in here. And it would line up pretty well if we put it in right here. So can we make it fit? Well, kinda. There is a lot going on here. I think it would work if we slapped it right there. Although we probably should be making these, at least that part, red. So, let's see how this works. Well, it seems like the inserter throughput mod is accurate, because after calculating in that way, seems like everything is making a lot of sense. And now the robots are picking up those heat pipes and taking them along up here to make our heat exchangers. And we definitely need to set this to the correct heat exchanger type. So I guess we can delete that. Delete that. We've got some junk on this to clear out eventually, but we are figuring out the power. So we're getting those taken care of. We also need to do the fluid burning heat sources as well. And probably the non-fluid burning heat source. So it looks like the fluid burning is made from the regular. And then the second tier of fluid burning is made from the first tier of fluid burning. But the second tier of the burner heat source is also made from the first tier, so we're probably just going to have some robot friends helping us out here. But this one is the fluid burning. So let's do the fluid burning aspect of it first then. So we upgrade this to fluid burning 2 to 50 and fluid burning 2. And we'll try my little trick with the requesters. So right there. Copy this over, pick that up, put them here, pick that up again, and across. Hopefully these requests are just coming from nearby. Invar, brass pipes, and more of those heat pipes. That's the big thing you want to make sure of, because you could have every resource available on the bus, but if it's like on the other side of the bus somewhere, the bots are going to be taking a very long path to get up here. But it looks like it's working fine, it's just limited based on those heat pipes. But otherwise it seems to be working. Okay, well let's build another one here. Do this. Pick it up and put it here. But this one is going to be for the non-fluid burning version. And get that one set up, and because it's not a direct insertion, it can just go directly from the requester chest. And hopefully nothing's too crazy. It's still alright. It's just going to take a while to fill up. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we're going to finish up with power here, and also work on the tier 3 of the ore mixtures. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.